Good morning and welcome to the Product Realization Group webinar series. This is the second in our series. We're going to talk today about Agile product development. We're fortunate to have Micah back from Annuvia as well as the supporting team. The flow today is going to be presentation, and then the team is going to be available to answer questions at the end. And where does product lifecycle, product development fit into the product lifecycle? So if you can see on the chart here, development is in between feasibility and beta, and it really focuses on building the readiness to move a product from feasibility into beta. It's where all the real blood and guts development work happens to make the product turn into reality. And in the impact in the development cycle is major because there's still investment going out, but there's really no product being shipped and no revenue coming in. So getting this area right is critical from a cost as well as a technology standpoint. Okay, and the impact from a overall cost standpoint is still fairly minimal as product is really not shipping in volume, but the impact on the overall trajectory of the company and the structure and the manufacturability is absolutely critical in this phase as well as in the feasibility phase. And you can see that as you look at the escalator effect. Okay, so to recap from the last session where we talked about product feasibility, what we concluded from that session was that the product was feasible after a couple of pivots. We completed a product requirements document, which is important in terms of understanding what is required in the development process. We estimated the design schedule and cost, which was important for Micah to understand whether he wanted to move forward or not. And we agreed that we were going to proceed with development. And in this phase, we had four key participants. We had Micah as a client. We had Volare and electrical software. We had Fusion Design and industrial mechanical, ACS for operations supply chain, and then Product Realization Group was managing the overall project. There were several other players as well, ranging from reliability to manufacturing, prototype support to test development. Okay, and a few Agile hardware development tips that we came up with for this section. When you're doing development, work in manageable sprints when you're working on this Agile development concept. Develop clear objectives for each sprint. Always have contingency plans. Development is not an exact science, so be flexible and be ready to navigate and change as needed in each sprint. Be prepared to respond quickly to changes or new opportunities that you identify during the development process. Okay, when you're talking about the mechanical aspects, design mechanical parts for long-term as opposed to one-off prototyping. And this goes into scaling the business as well as investing for the long term. And then when it comes to the team, establishing roles and responsibility that are clearly delineated early is critical, as well as staying flexible and keeping communication channels open throughout the process. Obtain buy-in on the big picture. You know, where are we really headed? What is the ultimate goal of the project? And Micah was very pivotal in terms of guiding the way there. Promote open dialogue and brainstorming, and develop a high level of trust throughout the project. And I think all those things happen in this project. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike and let him talk about his perspective on how the project went.
Great, thanks, Mike. So in order to give a little clarity on our market and the product and the need for the product, I wanted to start with a little bit of background on Annuvia and our organization. And as I describe this, I think you'll see the theme is essentially that we are a service-based company with some experience in software. We didn't have any hardware experience, and that was the rationale for forming the relationship with the Product Realization Group, as we understood our weaknesses right away and the need to partner with those who are strong in the space. So Annuvia is an organization headquartered in San Francisco. We started as a CPR and first aid training company. We work and credential on behalf of the American Heart Association, and we train organizations across the country. We work with a lot of the big Fortune 1000 companies, train them in first aid, and through that experience we learned a lot of the needs in the industry. One of them was to acquire AED units. And initially we saw the importance of AEDs, but there are a number of different challenges. And so we had to develop a go-to-market strategy to help meet those different challenges. One of the main things that happens with AED units is that there are all sorts of laws and regulations governing the use. And so we started by beginning a software product and then decided that once we had a software product, there would be a neat hardware component to tie into the software. And so that's kind of the life cycle of the Beacon product. The Beacon, the goal of the Beacon was to apply a hardware device to existing AED units, leveraging our infrastructure, leveraging our client relationships, but then tie in data that's obtained from that hardware into our software. Most notably, we wanted to obtain the readiness checks of AEDs. We wanted to have a live feedback system so that if the AED is used or the AED fails a self-check or the battery dies prematurely, we would be able to notify the owner. Many organizations have several challenges. Large organizations have units spread across the country, and currently, in order to receive Good Samaritan protections, AEDs have to be managed and documented. And so the goal was for the Beacon to fill that void and help the management automate so that human capital wasn't wasted checking the device to make sure the battery was actually working. In the overall AED industry, there's other challenges. Time to defibrillation is critical. There's a unfortunate history of recalls in the space, and so those were all opportunities we saw to help fill the void in using the Beacon. So the main core of the Beacon device was to automate readiness checks, reducing labor, giving more accurate accountability, improving the reliability of the products. With those checks, we also saw that there is an opportunity for geo-tracking, and that could be used to cut down on the time to defibrillation if there were actually an AED incident. The goal was always, if someone goes down and 911 is called, that 911 be able to reach out and ping the nearest AED so that it's actually used, not merely just sitting on the wall. So we had these great ideas, but we weren't really sure exactly how we wanted to go about building the product and addressing the need. That's approximately when we partnered with the product realization group. We went through the feasibility stage that we discussed previously, and we continued a very similar approach through the development. From my perspective as the CEO of Annuvia, we wanted to make sure right away that there weren't any showstoppers, that there weren't any major items that would throw a monkey wrench into our plans of developing this product. Some of these questions were answered during feasibility, but as we learned more and more about the production of the device, we were able to continue to address them. So we organized our efforts by continuing the notion of doing these sprints. I mentioned that we have a software product, and the software development follows the Agile methodology of trying to build and launch products very quickly, yet being agile enough to respond to the market and make different changes. We took that same approach to the hardware space and organized the efforts by approximately 1 month long sprints, having weekly calls to check in, having clear deliverables of what we hoped to accomplish and where we were at toward those deliverables, and then planning for the next stage of work. As we'll get into in a moment, there were a few different aspects going on, and there was a lot of concurrent engineering. So through the initial discovery, we were able to look into regulatory, legal, market feasibility, all simultaneously while we were actually testing out the product itself, building the breadboard, and building quick protos. Our partnership with the PRG enabled us to do a lot of those things simultaneously and very quickly, which is something that many organizations don't have, and therefore there's delays. So through this process, we came up with a number of bullet points of what really worked well for us, and then of course there are a couple things that we would do over. what I found to be really appealing about working with PRG through this development process was that I had a account manager, project manager oversee these efforts, work with all the separate consultants. We don't have core expertise in things like mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, operations, regulatory, and so we were forced to outsource those efforts to someone that we trusted, but that could also act as the primary resource for the various consultants working. From my perspective, that worked out well, so I wasn't wasting anyone's time unable to answer certain questions. The project manager has a working relationship with the different consultants, a high level of trust, working on many, many different projects, and so they were able to really get a lot of things done pretty quickly. Additionally, as you might imagine, in developing a product, word gets out kind of in the industry, whether it's from part suppliers or various consultants that could add value, who want to pitch and introduce their services. And so from my perspective as a naive CEO in a new industry, it was really nice having a barrier between some of these consultants so I could get a real honest feedback of what was necessary, what wasn't necessary, what costs we might incur as we went in, through the process, et cetera. Going through the development process, there's a couple things that I would certainly do again, slightly differently. One of them would be to involve other parties from my organization. I acted as the primary and exclusive liaison for this project, which diluted a lot of efforts in running our normal organization. So that was something that was a kind of a learning opportunity. We wanted to get this done as quickly as possible, which took some time away from running the other operations. Additionally, it's always nice to have feedback, and feedback from the industry is especially critical. And so I think we probably could have gained from having someone else from the industry, from my organization, keeping a closer eye on activities. Additionally, we would have liked to raise a little bit more money, and surprisingly, the fundraising goal and the goal to raise more cash isn't necessarily because the product exceeded costs. In fact, it didn't exceed costs and was very close or under initial projections, but raising more money would have allowed us to go faster. We still went incredibly fast. We did a lot of concurrent engineering, but I think we could have sped certain things up if I weren't holding up efforts by holding the checkbook and then let the consultants do what the consultants wanted to do. There's a number of efficiencies that are gained by allowing people to work from start to finish on a project as opposed to starting, stopping, which leads very much into the must-haves. You really must have an organization and resources that are willing to work with a client through an agile process like this. It's very uncommon for organizations to come in and do this start-stop approach and be very honest about the fact that they're about to do a start-stop approach. And so that was really key. We also were very transparent with our budget and our financial position. To start the project and to go through feasibility, we did some outside fundraising, and I think we were probably as open or more open than many clients on what our status was, but then fulfilled our obligations as we went. And so that developed a lot of trust between the different parties. If the market changed and sales slowed, I let the product realization group know, and so they were able to apply resources and shift things around as needed. It's really important to enjoy working with the team as well. In fact, it was something I looked forward to and still look forward to very much. If I dreaded seeing the team and working with consultants, this project would have been much, much more difficult. Additionally, they must enjoy working with one another. A lot can get done when there's a common alignment of goals and focus. Lastly, the thing that we did, whether it's due to intellectual curiosity or something else, was that we asked what if at every stage, and we continually asked questions through the development process, whether it was while sourcing parts, whether it was in working with an electrical engineer on a specific challenge, We asked what if over and over, and I think that process helped bring new ideas to focus as well. So what we'll do now is give you a slightly different perspective from the consultant's point of view. Now that I explained how wonderful it is to work together in these types of short sprint, let's get the opinion of the electrical and software side through the development process using the approach that we did.
Thank you, Micah. And it was, I think the key, one of the key points you mentioned is how important it is for people to be able to work together, and the trust that gets developed in this complex of a project. And I think overall, all the players involved worked hard to maintain trust and make sure that all the goals were met for meeting the project. So at this point, I want to introduce some of the players that actually were directly involved in the project. And I mentioned a few companies earlier, so we're fortunate to actually have around the table. We have Stuart Tyrell as the Director of Engineering for Volair Systems. Volair provides electronics engineering services, and they were directly responsible for the electrical and software development of the project. We also have Sheikha Reddy. He's a consultant at Adolf Consulting Services, and he provided the operations assistance as well as managing contract manufacturing and supply chain and business systems that provided the data management for the project, as well as Mark Brinkerhoff from Fusion Design, and he provided the industrial mechanical support. So they're going to talk a bit about their perspective on the project. Micah gave his perspective, and I thought it would be helpful to get the individual providers to give their perspective. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stuart, and he can share a little bit more about the electrical software aspects.
Hi, this is Stuart from Volair Systems. The Annuvia product is very much an embedded system, so involves hardware and software. So one of the early things that we achieved on the project was early access to development boards, and that allowed us to show that the system as a whole would work, and that interface between components was appropriate in advance of us doing custom board layout. So at the point at which we were doing custom board layout, we'd already mitigated a lot of the risk involved there. On the software side, the product has to communicate out to Annuvia's existing infrastructure. Now, with an embedded system, you can either go develop the hardware and then address the software that runs on that. Again, what we took the opportunity to do was to produce prototype code which ran on a PC. That verified that, again, our interface specifications were correct, that we could communicate out with Annuvia's servers, that Annuvia could do their testing, and it also served as reference code for the embedded code, which saved development time there. Throughout the whole of the development process, there was a lot of concurrent engineering, again, to parallelize up people's time in order to get feedback from the different areas within the team. So electrical had input from mechanical and vice versa, and from operations and supply. And that led to a more manufactural product and reduced the cost and time of the project as a whole.
Hello, this is Mark Brinkerhoff with Fusion Design, and I have the mechanical perspective on this program. And I think there are three key points here that are worth mentioning. And one was in the early feasibility study, which was discussed in a previous presentation in detail, we learned how to observe and create imagery that was usable in this detection method that was mentioned previously. So maintaining that throughout the development program was critical, and we were able to do that certainly through concurrent engineering efforts, as well as a good understanding of lighting and camera systems in this particular case that were used for this. That brings me to the second point, where we were able to leverage known and very mature technologies. These camera systems are very small now, and LEDs are as well, so the proper mix of the two allowed a rapid deployment as well as minimization of risks that goes with a program like this. And I think the last key point in our point of view was one where we designed the system for high-volume manufacturing, in this case mostly plastic injection molding from a mechanical point of view. there are some other soft components as well that were designed for long-term manufacturing. The whole point here is to design for the end game so you don't have an extra design iteration. On many programs, there's a prototype design that's not manufacturable in volume, and then you redo that for a volume solution. And we went straight to the volume solution, saving an iteration.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the mechanical perspective. And now we're going to turn it over to Shekhar Reddy. He's going to provide both the operation and contract manufacturing perspectives. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shekhar.
Thank you, Mike. Just wanted to kind of as PRG, we kind of have the opportunity of working with each other, and we're able to enable the NPI process, the new product development process, and we're able to communicate functionally between the team to kind of meet the deliverables and understand the impact of each of the tasks that are required between mechanical, electrical, and overall impact, and able to respond nimbly with respect to the any of the changes or that are required. And that was one of the critical things for us to kind of work seamlessly, and that helped us go through the NPI process wonderfully well. In addition to that, as Mike alluded earlier about all the Agile development approach that we have taken, the communication is the key important thing in the product design, and giving the perspective to the contract manufacturers and suppliers so that there is a clear identification of any of the long lead items or any pitfalls in product or the component not being available, and the functionality required for meeting the design requirements. I think that was wonderfully kind of done seamlessly. And we were able to leverage a lot of our local distributors and contract manufacturers in applying some of the DFX principles to obtain some of the critical components, where the engineering team could get a head start in trying to kind of evaluate the product as they perceive the design to be, and that helped develop the product development cycle time significantly, and also achieving the cost targets and with the overall end product in mind, and that really helped a lot. In addition to this, what we have also implemented is an Arena PLM system, which helped us have a clear visibility between all the design groups, electrical, mechanical, and my operations, including the suppliers. So this gave us a clear controlled access of all the information as the product being developed, and that helped all people involved to be able to kind of look at the design and then participate seamlessly. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Shekhar. And what we wanted to do now was leave a fair amount of time for questions. We have a lot of experienced resources here that invested a lot of effort in the project, and we want to make sure that if there was audience questions about how the project went and how you might be able to apply these techniques yourself, we want to open it up now for questions. So I'm going to push through the speaker bios. We already talked about them. So there's Micah and myself, Mark Brinkerhoff from Fusion, Stuart from Bolaire, Shekhar, and we're going to shoot to the development tips. This is just a summary of the tips we already talked about. And then at this point, we'd like to open it up for audience questions. And what I would recommend is if you can type those questions in the question section or the chat section, then we'll go ahead and answer those. If there are no audience questions, we can come up with a few standard questions around the process that the speakers can talk about here. So. Okay, well, why don't I start with, I don't see any directly from the audience. I'll start with a question from Micah about just the overall timing of the project, and what was, how did you go about managing the time frame and weaving that into your overall business practices?
Well, the beauty of outsourcing a lot of the work was that we could come up with a strategy and a plan. I could leave it to people that I trusted to enact that. Certainly there's only so much value I can add to something like electrical engineering. So I would hand that off to Valère and Stuart in particular. They would respond, either via email or phone calls with any questions, but it was in a very organized format. So from a day-to-day timing perspective, there wasn't a tremendous strain on resources, and most things were planned ahead of time. To begin each of the sprints and statements of work, so to speak, we would have estimates that were compiled by our project manager before we began getting input from each of the different consultants. And the project manager made sure that everyone stayed on task. At times we found that we were able to accomplish things faster than we expected, and at times they were slightly delayed, although the delays were not very significant. As I mentioned earlier, the notion of doing these sprints really enabled us to walk away with a sense of value after each stage. So there were really clear defined goals with each sprint, and I could walk away. In many cases it was to walk away with something very tangible. I could walk away with a SLS that Mark and his team helped us build for fitting purposes. I could walk away with a breadboard that Valère helped us put together, and then naturally Shaker, using his contacts and resources, was able to pull different development boards as well. So after each of these different engagements, I was able to go back to the market and go back to our team and investors, show them what we'd accomplished, which helped us gain support. Start to finish, we're looking at several months, but again, many of those delays were Annuvia's fault, not necessarily the product realization group's fault.
Great. Thank you, Mike, and I'd like to turn it off to if anybody else had any comment on this topic here. I'll turn it over to Mark.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was probably quite interesting to me on this program was this sprint concept. We do between 70 and 100 projects a year, and most of them are one really long sprint from a few months to many, many months, marathons in many cases. And this sprint process does two things. It compartmentalizes the effort in a way that's easier, I believe, for engineers to conceptualize and contemplate. For example, the goal is create an SLA, for example, or an SLS. How do we get there? We focus on that, we execute it, we deliver it. It's tested. While it's being tested, there's a pause. That pause is the time to consider what you just went through and maybe have ideas on what the next sprint will entail. So that pause, it turned out to be very helpful. The length of it can certainly be debated, but the fact that it existed was quite helpful from an overall program quality point of view, I believe.
Great. Thank you, Mark. I'm going to turn it over to some of the participants now. I know I've been involved in many projects over the years, and one of the big challenges that I've seen is how well different subcontractors interact with each other. And I wanted to get the perspective from each of the players that are here and get their idea of how did that process work, how do they interact with other players, and what were some of the takeaways that they learned. And why don't I start with electrical, and then we'll go to mechanical, and then operations. So go ahead, Stuart.
Sure. I mean, as was pointed out in my slide, a lot of this is about concurrent engineering, and having a full team available for the whole of a project, rather than having, for example, electrical starting work, getting as far as even laying out prototype boards and saying, there's the size of the board, throwing it over the wall to mechanical, and then mechanical do their layout or their work, and then we go to ops, and then ops say, well, there's a lead time on those components. The whole integration of the team meant that questions were answered early on. It meant that there was a more cohesive design process with input from all sides. And although one of the ideas behind Agile development is that you can quickly respond to to changes or changing conditions, the fact that we all knew about conditions throughout, we all knew the way the development was going throughout, meant that there were surprisingly few surprises.
Thank you, and we'll turn it over to Mark.
I think one of my favorite portions of this development was the way we did the weekly meetings, the 30-minute sessions, and there's a certain discipline that is rare, I believe, in my experience, to only focus on the strategic and very little tactical, maybe some, but don't try to solve the problems in your weekly status meetings. Identify them, take them elsewhere, set another meeting, do whatever task, but take it out of the mix so that the key players are there from a reporting and planning point of view, statusing and so on, but not to actually solve the problems. So often engineers hear a challenge and say, oh, I got to jump all over that, fix it right this very second. Well, the discipline to recognize that and distribute it across the rest of the program in a proper way is what I really liked. So.
Thank you, Mark. And this is Shaker here from Operations. Stuart and Mark explained it wonderfully well, and I think it was the interaction. I think that was the most important thing for us to kind of get the clear visibility of the product development as it's happening, and the operations has to get engaged right from get-go in the product development. That way we have the clear perspective of what all the product entails and what needs to be addressed and when, in order to make sure that with respect to, as Stuart mentioned about the long lead time, and with respect to not trying to solve all the problem like Mark mentioned, kind of gave us a clear perspective of how this whole product development was, and it really was a very enjoyable experience in helping develop this product.
Micah has something to add here.
Yeah, one quick thing to add. Due to my naivete in the space, I didn't know that this was such a novel concept to pool so many resources together at the same time. As a very brief example, before Breadboard was built, I was working with Shaker and the operations team in going through a review of different contract manufacturers in the Valley. We actually had a checklist. We went to 5 different CMs, and from all different tiers. I was trained and coached very well, so we walked in with a PowerPoint presentation. We had a great description of the project, a great description of the parties involved, presented, and then went through a scoring system to rank them. After that process, I learned of a 6th contract manufacturer that the different consultants have worked with in the past. The Valley's small and everyone's worked together at one point or another, but it was someone that I wanted to add to our list and to consider, and that was Hunter Technologies. So I introduced a new party to the group, and I was really blown away at how well everyone continued to run together. There wasn't a delay. We sat down, we brought in a new party that at the time didn't have the same type of history and working relationship as perhaps some of the other CMs, but it was there was zero pause and zero delay, and so that was quite enjoyable for me to see everyone try to accomplish the goals.
Yeah, very, very good point. And Joe did participate in some of the content development, and unfortunately he was not able to attend in person today, but his overall feedback on the project was from a product that was that early in the stages of development. He claimed not to have seen something so mature in terms of being able to scale and being as easy to manufacture those prototypes as other products that he'd worked on. So the feedback, overall from the manufacturing perspective was very positive. So we have just a few minutes left. So what I'd like to do is turn it over to final tips that the speakers want to provide, and then we're trying to keep to a 11:40 schedule. So why don't I start with Micah, and then we'll go down the line, Micah, Stuart, Mark, and Shaker, and go from there.
Great. So in closing, through the development process, what I would recommend would be to pool the parties and resources together as early as possible in the process, and to discover what the overarching goal is, and then from there backtrack into what we're referring to as sprints in order to build up to that end result. That was something that was very valuable. So as we're each doing our small sprints, we're able to also keep the larger goals in mind. And then I guess to reiterate the importance of enjoying the folks that you work with, perhaps if there's I didn't run into this, but perhaps if there's any kind of a gut reaction initially that says, hey, I don't want to spend a number of hours with a certain person, then to act on that swiftly. Fortunately, that wasn't a concern for us, and we all get along quite well, and so it really helps push the project forward.
Great, thank you, Mike. I'm going to deviate a bit here. There was a question about sprints, so why don't I take a quick deviation and we'll just answer that. So question is there a single sprint going on for the team or multiple sprints going on in parallel? And the structure was sprints were defined relative to the product development process, and then partners get involved in the sprints depending on whether they're involved in that phase of the project or not. So it was really based upon the product development cycle and what resources were required for the product development cycle. So, and if feel free to ask away if that didn't answer, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Stuart now and let him talk.
I just have something to add to that, in that from a software point of view, the sprints are relatively long. I mean, we're talking about 3 weeks a month for the sprint. So internally in each of the partners, and certainly for the electrical software side of things, we could take the sprint and split that down into smaller objectives. What that means during the development process is that there's a set of goals and achievements, and that's very satisfying to be able to go, we've done this week's work or this 3 weeks' work, and we've got a deliverable out of the end of it.
Very good, thank you. Okay, Mark?
Yeah, it's a little like a basketball game in that some of us are on the bench for a little while and then we play for a quarter, except a little more structured as far as goals go. The goal's always to win, I guess, so maybe they're similar in that regard. But I think the other tip I have for in general, and we kind of had it because we worked together a lot already, but it's like a communication plan. Roles and responsibilities of every individual need to be defined very early. And you can't instantly have a relationship with others unless you've already done it. So building that relationship is key. So if you don't have it, try to get it quickly. Do joint events together, technical and non-technical, so that you know how others think within it. Again, that's like a team sport. Once you understand how the other players think and operate, you can optimize overall program performance. So that would be my tip.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And I'm going to end it here with a shaker.
Thank you, Mike. And I think the key thing is the PRG group, the way we have worked together on several projects, has significant experienced individuals who have the clear perspective of what the requirements are and how well to communicate between the product design and the operations and kind of the requirements of the product. So that really helped a lot in trying to kind of get this product development process done without really falling into any pitfalls. I think that was the key thing for us.
Very good, thank you. And I'll just begin with the end in mind, as people that do that usually are more successful. And with that, we're out of time, so I appreciate everybody's time on the call, as well as the speaker's time to invest in this. And we will be posting this on the website later in case you missed it, and also putting the slides for reference. So if you have any questions, feel free to email, and we hope you enjoyed the session today.